Are you a competitive tennis player and you find yourself going through the motions in practice, or you have an athlete that tends to go through the motions in practice and doesn't have a quality practice? Hi, I'm Dr. Patrick Cohn here with mental performance coach Jaclyn Ellis. Today we're going to talk about how to get more out of that practice session so you can transfer it to your matches. This is the Tennis Psychology Podcast. Jaclyn, we see a lot of young tennis players specifically. They tend to go through the motions and they don't really apply themselves in practice. They're taking up space, as we call it, and they're there physically, but they're not getting the most out of that practice. I assume part of your coaching is to help tennis players have better practice habits, but what are some of the challenges that you see from that angle of just going through the motions?
Yes, great point. There is a lot of that going through the motions. I tell my athletes, you can't just roll out of bed and show up to practice and say, okay, I'm here, tell me what to do. That's not going to be an effective practice. Okay, and a lot of coaches do dictate, what drills you're doing in practice, but you want to have an idea, you the athlete, you want to have an idea of what you want to work on, what needs improvement for that week or that day of practice. So yes, this idea of going through the motions, that's not going to help you really take your game to the next level. And a lot of times if you are the athlete who you go to practice, you go to the match, and the match does not show what you can do in practice, that could be due to your practice habits.
Yeah, I think it's also around effort too, is how much effort and how much intensity. Sometimes players, they give 50% effort or less in a practice session. I don't know if they're conserving energy or they're just out there trying to have fun, but that ultimately is going to lead to not giving full effort in the match and not having full intensity in the match.
Yes, agreed.
So let's talk about some principles of effective practice, what we call smart practice in our work. How can athletes get the most out of their practice, starting with prior to practice? What's the mindset? What are some of the things they can keep in mind there?
Yes, I encourage my athletes first to come up with an intention. What is the intention? What is the purpose of practice? Why are we here? What would you like to work on? A lot of times at the start of the session, I will ask them, you had training this week. What was the purpose of your training this week? What did you work on? And if not, what would you like to work on in the next few days of practice? So having that purpose can give them direction and it can help them stay motivated and committed and put in that effort during that training session.
Yes. And I also think about from that perspective is the intensity piece. Is we know if you practice like you play, that is going to have more transfer to your competitive matches. So we need to help athletes identify what is that intensity level. And I think the intensity level really can start before practice is getting up. And you and I, Jaclyn, talk quite a bit about helping athletes with more intensity. That's the physical activation that you want your athletes to have, but it's also the mental activation, which I call having challenge. You need to feel challenged out there when you're practicing.
Yes, another great point. If you get to pick your opponent at practice, let's say, and you're always picking somebody who you think you'll beat, where's the challenge in that? Challenge yourself to pick an opponent who might have a better ranking than you. That way you can challenge yourself and apply a lot of the tools that you're implementing in your match play. I encourage my athletes to do all of the little things, dot the I's, cross the T's, do everything that you would do in a match in practice. That way you are using that physical and mental intensity in the training session.
And I think we can also apply that idea to drills. Like, I'm going to hit 20 in a row cross court without missing, or 20 in a row deep, maybe 50, if you're really good. Or I am going to really work on my footwork. I'm going to challenge myself to go for every ball, get a good first jump, and go for every wide ball. So there's many different ways, and I think it ties back into what you talked about, positive intention, having objectives in your practice. You can tie it right into what is the game within the game here, right? We talk about other practice principles that are effective too, and that is You don't want to just go out and work on your serve the whole time in practice. You want to mix it up, which we call variable practice.
Yes, variable practice is extremely important for all athletes. You want to mix up the different scenarios or match conditions. So for example, if you know that you have a tournament on clay court in 2 weeks, maybe you could try to get yourself out on the clay courts if you normally practice on hard court. That way you're mixing it up, you're preparing for that scenario. Or practicing indoor versus outdoor. Well, with outdoor, you have the wind factor. Okay, so you want to practice that for matches that might be windy. Or maybe you could mix up your opponents or the different drills or target areas. What do we want to work on?
Yeah, and apply all the parts of the game, right? Like work on volley, serve, overheads, swinging volleys, ground strokes, work on everything, not just your strengths, which a lot of tennis players just like to stick to their strengths. All right, very good. Thanks for joining us on the Tennis Psychology Podcast. I've been speaking with Jaclyn Ellis. I'm Dr. Patrick Cohn. If you're interested in one-on-one mental coaching, jump over to peaksports.com for more information there, or you can contact us and send us your question that we can answer on this podcast. Thanks for joining us.